Hello.
Hello. What a fabulous speech.
Thank you.
It was beautiful.
Thank you very much. But we're going to talk about you, not me. So, because I know what I'm doing, we had a little chat beforehand. And one of the things that I found out, and it's obviously Stephen and I, by the way, we're not going to the people who wrote all the questions, we're not going to ask those questions or answer them. But what I found out about Stephen is that Stephen is actually Dr. Stephen Roberts, and he's actually a geophysicist. So I thought that was really interesting, because absolutely you're walking the talk in terms of, you know, being an expert in one thing and ending up having a career doing something else. So I'm just quite interested in how you go from being a geophysicist to a banker. What was your journey, Stephen?
So the easy answer is the oil price was rubbish about 30 years ago. And Barclays were the first people that interviewed me, and they offered me a job and I took it. And it's not complicated. So that was 26 years ago. So, but I suppose that there's quite an interesting journey as to how we ended up here doing this with Creative England, which is a huge privilege. So thank you for letting us host this. So up until 4 years ago, I was a proper banker.
Okay, you're a proper banker rather than
so a proper one. I mean, traditional, one might say. And then we had a new chief executive, and he said, would I come and help him do speed and transformation? And I thought, what a crazy job title to be like in charge of speed and transformation. How would I tell the kids what I've been doing? So we changed it to strategic transformation, doesn't matter. And we just started doing some experiments. And you used exactly the words that we used. Like, we've been around 326 years this year. So we've been through all 4 of those revolutions. And the one that this latest one, we need to survive and thrive in that. And I see that as a big part of my job. It's how we help colleagues and customers go through that revolution. So we just started doing some experiments, and we had a team of people who were all sort of old timers like me, and because we've been around a bit, I suppose we thought we could have a go. So some of the things we did, we put free Wi-Fi into all the branches in the UK, and we left it on 24 hours a day. And we did have a sort of rationale for it, but it was to help us get people doing mobile banking. But weird stuff started happening. So within 6 months, we'd become the largest distributor of Wi-Fi in Europe to our branch network. And we started picking up on social media that kids were arranging to meet in our branches. So they'd say, I'll meet you in Barclays where I'm robbing them of their Wi-Fi. So for the first time in our whole history, we had people wanting to come to our buildings. Because you only ever go to a branch because you have to. It's not like it's a
reduces marketing costs, which maybe isn't the best thing to say to a group smart cheers.
And then off the back of that, we thought we needed to help colleagues feel as though we were taking them with them in the digital age. So we made, at the time, the largest ever corporate purchase of iPads in the world. And I think a lot of people thought we were nuts. And it did feel like we were nuts as well, because what happened was that only about 10% of the staff actually used them.
And why was that?
Well, about 20% who tended to be men and tended to be sort of in their 50s, sort of were quite Luddite about them and said, sort of, see that cupboard there, that's where the laptop is you gave me 2 years ago. I've never used that either. So they were proudly and said, banking isn't about these are toys, it's what's up here. But the really interesting majority were the 70% who said, when you spoke to them, look, I sort of get this stuff, and I know if it's an Apple product, I'm supposed to be able to take that box and use it. But actually, I'm confused and bewildered. And the really interesting word they used was that they were embarrassed. And embarrassed.
They were embarrassed because they didn't know how to navigate it.
And they didn't want to put their hand up and say, I don't know how to do this, because they'd be embarrassed in front of all their other colleagues. And that began us thinking, how do we persuade people not to be embarrassed? And we've been talking about how people will adopt technology often from a generation below. So like my mum or my dad will adopt technology, not from me because I haven't got the patience to sit with him, but from my kids who do have the patience. So we decided we'd use that grandchild, grandparent thing, and so we asked for some volunteers, and we got a small group of people who we decided would wander around all of the branches in a systematic way. And they would be the grandchildren, and they'd persuade people not to be embarrassed, and we called them digital eagles. And we said, look, you're bound to find people like you, ask them if they'd like to be one. Anyway, within a couple of months, we got 3,000 people who volunteered. We now have about 17,000 in the UK and another 17,000 in Africa who actively go out helping people to do that stuff. So that got us involved with all sorts of interesting organisations. That led us to conversations with people like the Fab Lab movement and guys in Cambridge, Raspberry Pi, and the BBC with the microbit that we were one of the partners of. And all this was going on at the same time. So if you visit a branch now, you'll find large parts of the branch aren't used anymore. We don't keep cash in the vaults underground anymore. There's nothing in those. The downstairs tends to have people in, but the upstairs is often, there's a few people kicking around doing stuff. So we had a lot of space. So we were doing digital stuff. We had a lot of people who loved digital things, and we decided...
And you had great Wi-Fi.
And we had great Wi-Fi. And we decided, well, we can use that space to do something. So a year ago, we opened the first of the Eagle Labs, and then we opened another 9, and then we met you, or your team.
Then you met us.
And beautiful things happened with the flight.
So would you like, for the, just to perhaps tell the audience a little bit about the flight programme, and so that's sort of taking your Eagle Labs to a next step, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so what an Eagle Lab looks like is a classic one would be the Brighton branch. So there's on Preston Road in Brighton, for those who know it, there's a 1931 branch building. You can imagine the architecture. We closed that branch 2 years ago because there wasn't anyone going into it. Squatters moved in, and then we took the branch back and made it an Eagle Lab. So it has a maker space within it. That means 3D printers, laser cutters and things. The vaults downstairs now have a photo studio and video studio and broadcast a sports channel every morning. And there are lots of desks and spaces and offices that we've sort of managed to squash into what was a former branch building that businesses rent from us. On Fridays, it's free Fridays when anyone can come in and use any of the machines free. On Mondays, it's Mend It Mondays, where you come in and bring any equipment you have, and we'll have a go at fixing it. And it's become a huge community hub. It's somewhere now there's a waiting list of businesses that want to be in there, and we thought what a beautiful place to try out the Eagle's flight, which we hope will be one of many that we will do throughout the country, but we had a competition for businesses to join the flight. So
I think we had, so for the audience, so Eagle Flight is a program that we're jointly running, where we have recruited, I think, I'm not sure, I think we've had over 100 applications. So this is like a hothouse of masterclasses and mentoring and some investment. But crucially, I suppose the important thing, which goes back to your point about community, is there's no point in putting money into something if you don't then connect it to somebody who can help. So the flight program, it does just that. And this is the first pilot, I suppose, of our partnership together. And we've got 8 companies. And I think what's really interesting about the story of how we met was that we at Creative England, we were introduced to Barclays through a company that we had actually invested in, who I think had been to one of your events, and you were very interested in what they were doing, and you said, and they said, well, you should meet Creative England. So we really try to work very closely with the businesses that we work with. As I said, it's not just about and putting money in, it's all sorts of other things. But I think that sort of generosity of spirit in terms of how everybody can all help each other, that's one of the things that underpins, I think, the flight programme.
It's a big deal of what can we do to help network those businesses across the huge community that we have, and to replicate that across the rest of the UK. And
I suppose the other thing that's quite interesting as well is, again, where we align is in that interest in stuff that's happening all over the country.
Definitely.
So and I know that's something you're very enthusiastic about. So tell me something about some of the other labs that you have in different parts of the country.
So we've got 2 in Cambridge, 1 in Birmingham, 1 in Salford in Media City, in the Landing, that's there, 1 in the main library in Jersey, 1 in Bournemouth, 1 in Brighton, 1 in Norwich. The next 2 should be Belfast and Cardiff, and 1 with Sheffield Hallam in Sheffield in the art and design department in the Victorian Post Office.
So there's definitely a vibrant, there is definitely opportunities outside of London, isn't it? So and what do you have? I don't know if you have much to do with the businesses that are using those spaces, but what's your sense of the types of businesses that you are seeing that perhaps that by doing this program that perhaps you didn't see, I don't know, 5 years ago?
That digital's definitely having an impact, but I think it's what's really interesting for us, it's moving away from just being about software. It's now the interesting stuff that I suppose the connections with Cambridge gave us and people like Raspberry Pi is the part of, or the nuance to the 4th digital revolution is the physical things. So to have something like a computer, like a Raspberry Pi, that if it goes wrong, you can chuck away. And you can, that sounds ever so wasteful, doesn't it? But what it means is that you can try out and do things, and people can create things now in the same way kids used to write apps that get sold for tens of millions of pounds in their bedroom. Now people can create physical things in their bedrooms that can get sold for tens of millions of pounds. It opens up an incredible new market. So I think the opportunities for the creative sector are amazing with moving from the software into the hardware combination as well, and that's what we're seeing.
And you from how you've described it, the bank recognised a real change in the marketplace in terms of what was happening in business generally and in civil society and so on, and you've had to change your people inside in order to reflect that. Do you think what's your thoughts around the other implications for big organisations like yourself? Because in terms of what you're doing, I would imagine it was quite a hard sell, wasn't it, going in and sort of selling this to somebody, that can we do this and can we provide free stuff and this, that and the other?
And it still is.
Okay.
but having, and that's why it's really important for us to work with organisations and beautiful organisations like yours that through doing that, people start to see what the value is. And I think I'd mentioned to you, we had Prince Charles visit one of the Eagle Labs last Thursday, and the chief executive was there with him, and that gives people stop thinking this is a crazy guy and this is a crazy idea of opening up old branch space and putting 3D printers and renting out space and things like that, to start thinking, wow, there's something positive and serious and helping the brand and the community and giving us a relevance again. So, and I think everyone can learn that, but you have to do it from inside. Just building an innovation lab in head office and sort of saying, that was as silly as us buying 10,000 iPads and just thinking that would be
Apple
job
didn't
done.
think that was silly. So we've got lots of little companies, and some of them actually they're bigger now than they were a couple of years ago. Anyway, but we've got lots of small businesses in the audience. So what's your advice to them around engaging with a company like Barclays? And I'm thinking a company in two ways. A big company, because a lot of what we do is about connecting big and little, but also I suppose as a financier, because one of the things that I feel that I spend a lot of time talking to businesses about is the different types of money that are around that will service a different type of need that they might have. So imagining that you're going to get everything in one place from one provider is a bit naive, really. So what's your advice?
I think it's much, and it's more us needing to take some advice, but I think the advice is more, whatever the size is, have fabulous people and have a plan. So if you've got a good idea, how does that good idea go to execution out in the market? But I think that's the same whether you're big or small. I think it's much more for us to learn to become more humble and to listen and to become more interested. And the effect you can have on just talking to a business about what they're doing and listening and showing an interest is so gigantic. You forget how important and helpful you can be if you just become a bit more humble and listen. Honestly, I think it's more our problem than the business's problem.
Well, I don't think you're necessarily what people would describe as a typical idea of what a banker is. Then, is it really? It's quite interesting that you're talking about.
We've got some lovely bankers out there. You should have a chat with Juliet.
What I mean is that when you're talking about actually being you're talking about receiving people, and you're talking about working collaboratively. The point I made some of the points I made is that so often everything is communicated as one or the other. Everything's very black and white, isn't it? And yet actually, when you get to the bottom of people's relationships, they're always a bit more subtle than that.
No, definitely.
And actually, there's always a bit more give and take and discussion going on. And that perhaps we've all got to get on different platforms and talk a bit more about the listening that we do, as much as we talk about the transmitting that we do.
And I would say to any of the businesses out there, come and visit one of the eGlabs, because you might think I'm talking a load of old bullshit or whatever, and to make it up, but come and see what happens in real life, that we are trying to change exactly how we work with organisations and the relationships we have. So please, that you can come in any time to any of those labs. Just have a little Google and it'll tell you where they are.
Thank you very much,
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming here. Thank you.
Thank you.